Edward's Royal Day Out. The stations all along the line were being repainted. The engines knew what that meant. "The Queen is coming," said the painters. The engines in the shed were excited and wondered who would pull the royal train. Everyone believed they would be chosen. All except Edward. "It won't be me," he said plainly. "I'm much too slow and not as strong as any of you. The Fat Controller and Her Majesty wouldn't approve."
"Nonsense," said Gordon. "You're much too useful not to be considered." "Indeed," added Henry. "You always get your passengers home no matter the circumstance." The other engines agreed.
"Thank you all," said Edward, "but I look forward to seeing which of you is chosen." The days passed. The engines became more and more excited to see who would be the royal engine. But Gordon and Henry were worried. They both wanted Edward to pull the royal train, but they both knew either one of them would be chosen.
"It's a shame," said Henry in the sheds one night. "Edward's been on this railway the longest, and he's never once been chosen for any special trains." "Indeed," agreed Gordon. "He's done so much and never receives anything in return. Edward is the most useful engine on this island, and I think it's about time he got what he deserves." The two engines consulted together. A few days later, Edward was resting in his shed when the Fat Controller came to see him. "Hello, sir," said Edward. "What brings you here?" "I've some very exciting news for you, Edward," smiled the Fat Controller. "I've finalised the roster for the Queen's visit. Gordon will go in front to clear the line, and you will pull the royal train." Edward was in disbelief. "Me, sir? But what about Gordon or Henry? Surely they're much more worthy of the job than I am." "They said they wanted you to have the honour," said the Fat Controller. "And the other engines agreed with them. And besides, I've spoken to Her Majesty herself, and she said she'd be happy to travel behind an engine like you." Edward was so happy he didn't know what to say, so he just blew his whistle as loudly as he could. "Now you'd best be off to the works," smiled the Fat Controller. "You need to be repainted and polished before the big day." The great day came. Edward's driver and fireman came to see him in the shed. The blue engine's paint was spotless and his brass shone. "Are you ready to come out today?"
they asked. "Oh yes, please," said Edward. So the fireman lit the fire and made a nice lot of steam. Then the driver pulled the lever and Edward puffed away. "Beep, beep, beep," he whistled. "Look at me now!" The others happily whistled back. They were proud of their friend. Away went Edward to fetch his special coaches.
"Be careful, Edward," called the coaches. "Don't bump and bang us like the other engines do."
So Edward came up to the coaches very, very gently, and the shunter fastened the coupling.
"Thank you, Edward," said the coaches. "That was kind. We are glad you are taking us out today."
Before they left, the driver and fireman decorated Edward's front with flags, but on his buffer beam they fitted the royal arms. Edward had never felt more magnificent. Then they went to the station at the end of the line where Gordon was waiting.
"Seems I'd better get a move on,"
smiled Gordon, and set off to clear the line. Then Edward saw a group of very important passengers waiting on the platform, and among them stood the Queen. "Beep, beep," whistled Edward. "Come aboard, Your Majesty." "What a marvellous engine you are," smiled the Queen, as she climbed aboard Edward's coaches. The very important passengers followed, the guard blew his whistle and raised his green flag, and Edward puffed off. Edward had a wonderful journey. All the children ran to rave as he went past, and he met old friends at all the stations where he stopped to fill up with water. The Queen enjoyed her journey very much, and even visited the station staff while Edward had a drink. At last, the big station came into view, and a mighty cheer went up as the Queen's train glided into the station. Edward couldn't help but feel overjoyed as he brought the train into the station. The Queen was met by the Fat Controller, and before doing anything else, she thanked him for their splendid run and asked to see all the engines. "Three cheers for the Queen!" cried the engines, and they all whistled and cheered. The Queen, smiling, waved to the engines till she passed the gate. Next day, the Queen spoke specially to Gordon and Edward, and another uproar of whistles and cheers erupted from the station as they took her away. That night, Edward returned back to the sheds late, but the other engines were still awake. They all cheered as Edward backed in, but Gordon and Henry were loudest of all. "You certainly proved yourself to be a fine royal engine today," said Henry. "Indeed," added Gordon. "I couldn't have done it better myself." Edward didn't reply immediately, but gave a smile to both his friends and whispered a quiet, "Thank you." "Perhaps we'll have to do this some other time," smiled Gordon. "What do you think of that?" But he didn't hear what he thought, for Edward was so tired and happy that he fell asleep at once. Once upon a time, there was a little engine called Edward.